In the snowy mountains of winter, the story commences with an owl perched on a branch of a pine tree, observing a girl traversing through the snow-covered terrain. Despite the harsh weather conditions, the girl persists, clad only in a thick dress without a hat or gloves. Undeterred, she forges ahead, undaunted by the snow. However, Josian winter nights are treacherous, fraught with peril. As the girl navigates through the woods and icy rocks, she becomes the subject of scrutiny by wild animals, who view her as potential prey. At times, she pauses momentarily, contemplating the foolishness of her mission. After all, who in their right mind would hunt hares in the midst of winter? Suddenly, she slips and tumbles into the freezing snow, sustaining injuries. Despite her tattered dress stained with blood, she summons the strength to rise, refusing to succumb to the weather's adversity. Her determination propels her forward, until she gazes ahead and witnesses a horrifying sight. Her blood runs cold as she finds herself face to face with a colossal tiger, its fierce gaze fixated upon the vulnerable girl. She appears defenseless, her body battered and bloodied, resembling a delectable morsel, a perfect target for the ravenous predator. In the midst of the harsh winter, the girl gazes at the tiger's menacing fangs, seemingly entranced. She contemplates the notion that animal cruelty knows no distinction, whether its victim is an elderly man with graying hair or a child seeking protection. Ultimately, hunger dictates the outcome. As the girl peers into the tiger's gaping maw, she attempts to plead for assistance, but her words freeze in her throat, paralyzed by fear. She realizes that she only has moments to live, but she doesn't want to die in vain. Suddenly, the moment of truth has arrived. The tiger made a final leap and grabbed the girl, and she didn't even have time to feel anything. All that was left in the snow were red ice flakes of frozen blood, and the girl became another prey of the mountain predator. But suddenly she opens her eyes and sees a figure on top of her. She thinks that above her is her mother who wants to take care of her. She is lying in bed as she slowly regains consciousness. Then someone puts their hand on her forehead to check her temperature, and this gentle touch pleases her very much. Finally, the girl comes to her senses. She is hurt, but her wounds have been treated and bandaged skillfully. She opens her eyes to look around. Suddenly, she sees an unknown face smiling. It was the face of a kind man, but she is still scared as she doesn't understand where she is. She jumped out of bed screaming in fear and surprise. She wants to understand what is happening there, but the stranger hurried to calm her down, explaining that she should be more careful. Her wounds have not yet healed, so sudden movements could be very dangerous for her. She calmed down a little and looked around. She is in a richly decorated room with expensive furniture, which is not normal for her. She is very surprised. She imagines that she is still sleeping, but the boy who takes care of the girl turns around and says that she is awake. Scared, she asks who he was. Then the boy replies that his name is Noah, and he is the apprentice of an archmage called Ciccasia. The girl continued to observe Noah attentively and noticed that he was wearing expensive and high-quality clothes, indicating that he came from a wealthy background. Noah's hands were delicate and soft, suggesting that he was not accustomed to hard physical labor. He gently placed his hand on her forehead to check her temperature, and the girl realized that she didn't have a fever, which made Noah very relieved. As she focused on his hand, the girl suddenly fell to the ground and knelt down, apologizing to Noah. She confessed that she had been staring at him for a long time, but didn't want to get in trouble. Noah was completely shocked and didn't know how to respond. He reassured the girl, asking her to calm down and stop panicking, and explained that he was not the master of the house. The girl was now in Archmage Cash's house. She asked Noah if she could go back to her house in Joseon, but then realized that it would be better not to return, as a terrible life awaited her there. She fell silent for a moment and examined her injured and carefully bandaged feet, wondering how she had managed to survive in the mountains after being attacked by a bloodthirsty tiger. The girl recalled the last moments before losing consciousness during the tiger attack, and a shiver ran down her spine as she remembered what had happened that night. Suddenly, a young and beautiful woman entered the room. The boy turned to the magician and told him about the girl's terrible wounds. He couldn't just leave her in trouble, so he decided to help her. Kasha carefully examined the girl and her apprentice, pondering for a moment before making her decision. In a week's time, the sorceress would send the girl back to her world, and everything would be back to normal. The girl was taken aback by Kasha's strictness and didn't want to return to her home in Joseon. She had nothing but bad memories of her homeland. She tried to protest against the decision, but Kasha firmly stated that one student in her house was enough. The witch left the room and called Noah to follow her, leaving the girl feeling upset by her behavior. Noah looked at his mistress, unsure of how to defend the girl. He felt sorry for her, knowing she was hurt and weak. However, the girl didn't lose hope and pleaded with the witch once again for help. She asked if it was too difficult for such a beautiful and strong woman to protect a girl in need. Kasha replied, expressing her confusion as to why she needed to do so. The girl explained that going back to her world would only lead to a terrible fate. In her world, she was a slave who had to hunt in the mountains during winter just to survive. If she failed to catch any game, her masters would beat her mercilessly. She looked into Kasha's eyes and cried out that she didn't want to return to her past life. She believed it would be better to die than to live. Noah also defended the girl, urging his mentor to take care of her. However, Kasha decided to deny their pleas, stating that she didn't run an orphanage for needy children. Her house was a place for studying magic, not for raising orphans and the homeless. The girl heard Kasha's words and made a desperate offer. She said she was willing to study magic if it meant she could stay in the house. Falling to her knees in front of the young sorceress, she expressed her desire to live there, as death awaited her at home. She hesitated as she looked at the determined girl, and soon, a wave of sympathy washed over her. Memories from the past flooded her mind, and the little girl reminded her of someone she once knew, who was filled with excitement as she spoke about the wonders of magic. The girl continued to gaze at the sorceress, eagerly awaiting her response. Kasha's expression changed, contorted by a painful grimace, and beads of sweat formed on her forehead. These memories were deeply unpleasant for her. The boy grew concerned and remarked that his master didn't look well. Kasha snapped back to reality and glanced at the girl once again. However, she firmly declared that she would not change her decision. The girl had 1 week to leave Kasha's property. As the witch made her way towards the exit of the room, the girl pleaded, offering to undertake any task in order to stay. She was willing to do anything. Kasha contemplated a test for the girl. The boy turned to his master, urging her not to test the girl, as she was still weak. However, the brave little girl interjected, stating that she was ready to take on any task and perform any work. She added that she could do anything as long as she was taught true magic. Kasha would allow the girl to stay on her property, but she would have to pass a challenging test. With that, Kasha turned to the girl and began recounting her story within the confines of her property. The weather is always pleasant here, with rain and snow only appearing if it's desired. However, beyond Kasha's property lies a mysterious and eerie forest, inhabited by magical creatures and plants. The witch's powers do not extend to this forest, and Kasha explains that it's what prevents the Black Forest from expanding further. It takes great skill and knowledge of sorcery to maintain this boundary. Rose, the young girl, looked at Kasha with confusion, unable to comprehend why the sorceress was sharing all this information. Kasha paused, then locked eyes with the girl once again. She revealed that she needed something very important to strengthen the magic within her property and prevent the Black Forest from encroaching further. This crucial item was a magical flower called a silk bell, which could stabilize the magic and provide an extra layer of protection against the forces of darkness. However, the silk bell was guarded by the spirit of the wind. Its delicate leaves and flowers emitted a sparkling sound when the wind blew. Kasha desired this flower to enhance her magic and ward off unwanted guests. She informed Rose that she must retrieve the silk bell at any cost, as no one else could assist her in this perilous task. The Black Forest was filled with mortal dangers and surprises. Despite these ominous words, the brave girl remained undeterred. She gathered all her courage and declared her readiness to undertake this challenging test and obtain the silk bell. In return, she requested that Kasha teach her the art of magic if she succeeded. Kasha agreed, but only on the condition that the silk bell was delivered. With a strange smile, Kasha cast a spell, and suddenly, the girl found herself holding a lamp that would illuminate her path in the dark forest. In a place consumed by impenetrable darkness, the girl was astounded to discover the lamp in her hands. Kasha handed her a red cloak and wished her good luck before leaving the room. Now, Rose, wearing the red cloak and clutching the lamp, found herself in the dark forest after a few hours. Determined to find the silk bell at all costs, she pushed through the dense vegetation, surrounded by complete darkness. Rose scanned the dark thicket, desperately searching for any sign of the bell. Suddenly, a strange sound echoed through the air, resembling the ringing of a silk bell. The brave girl listened intently, hoping to hear the sound again. Rose struggled to determine the direction she needed to go in the challenging dark forest. After some time, she believed she had found the correct path. Suddenly, a peculiar glowing creature materialized right in front of her. The unknown inhabitant of the dark forest turned towards her and remarked on the busyness of the day. This small, glowing creature possessed the ability to speak, resembling a forest fairy. The girl was startled by the unexpected appearance, while the stranger inquired if she was searching for the silk bell. The flower fairy explained that this territory belonged to her, and if the girl wished to proceed, she must first answer a question. Rose was taken aback by this and remained silent, unsure of how to respond. Curious, the forest fairy posed her question, asking the girl to guess the name of the flower that blooms the longest, regardless of the beginning or end of its life. Rose pondered the answer, her expression reflecting her confusion. The girl suggested that this flower could be cotton. However, the forest fairy responded by saying that she was not aware of any plant called cotton. The girl was unsure of what to say next, so she asked the forest fairy why cotton doesn't grow there even though it is abundant where she comes from. After some time, the flowers fall and something white and pleasant to the touch appears in their place. Her mother then uses that substance to create beautiful fabric. The forest fairy listened attentively to her tale and was surprised to learn that people know how to make fabric from plants. She liked the girl's story and asked if she believed her answer to the riddle was correct or if she had any other answers. The girl gazed at the forest fairy and reminisced about her home and mother. She replied to the fairy that there are many beautiful and useful plants in the world, but they bloom at different times of the year. Her mother always said that cotton will always be with a person if they are wearing clothes made of cotton. So, Rose decided to stick to her answer. The girl turned to the fairy and confidently stated that the flower that lives the longest is cotton. Therefore, this is her only answer and there are no other possibilities. The forest fairy looked at the girl in surprise, intrigued by her determination. She asked if this was her final answer to the riddle. The girl responded that she had nothing else to consider and had already given her answer, which she would not change. She happily declared that the girl had passed the test and correctly guessed the riddle about the flower. The forest fairy smiled and looked at her, soon becoming lost in her own memories. Rose reminded the fairy of a girl who had also been in that dark forest once and solved her riddles. She remembered that the girl had great potential in witchcraft. Rose asked the forest fairy if she would give her the silk bell as she had passed the test. The fairy replied that the girl could now advance in her territory, but she would have to get the magic flower alone. She thought for a while and asked Rose what happened to her mother. The girl tried to answer something but then remained silent. The memories of her mother were heavy and painful. The fairy did not insist on questioning her. She showed the girl the path she should follow to find the silk bell. The girl looked at the intense glow in front of her, but she stood still, afraid to take a step forward. The forest fairy asked what the girl was afraid of. Rose remained silent, thinking that she had already died once and didn't want that fate again. But Rose reunited her courage and decided that she will no longer be afraid of anything in this life and will be able to survive at any cost. All she needs is to move forward. So facing fear is necessary, whatever it is. She moved forward determined and reached out her hand to the sacred flowers that attracted her with their beauty. As soon as the girl touched the bright flowers, she felt an unusual energy. Rose closed her eyes without understanding what was happening, being taken somewhere by a magical energy. Shortly after, The intense glow disappeared and Rose regained her senses. Opening her eyes, she saw an incredible scene that did not fit in her mind. The girl suddenly found herself in a mesmerizing place. In front of her stood an enormous tree, radiating a pleasant light. The tree exuded a powerful magical energy, and she couldn't help but notice its connection to the silk bell. Rose realized that she was standing in a vast clearing, with a narrow and crystal-clear stream that she needed to cross in order to reach the towering tree. As she gazed ahead, she tried to decipher her next move. Feeling perplexed and awestruck by the colossal tree, she glanced at the forest fairy, relieved to see that it hadn't vanished. Rose admired the vibrant flower gardens surrounding them. The fairy urged her to hurry, emphasizing that the silk bell awaited her in the tree. It would only take a little more effort to obtain it. Observing Rose's surprise, the fairy instructed her to climb the colossal tree, cautioning her to think carefully as it was a perilous task. Rose stared at the daunting challenge in horror, as the giant tree seemed to pierce the sky with its towering presence. Climbing such a tree would prove exceedingly difficult. Sensing her fear, the forest fairy, an air spirit, assured her that she could assist in the ascent. Rose looked at her in astonishment as the air spirit cast a spell and infused her with its breath. Instantly, Rose rose from the ground, lifted by the currents of air, soaring higher and higher. The girl trembled with fear as she floated, carried by the air currents, towards the tree. She noticed that the tree trunk was entwined with sharp thorns, adding to the treacherous nature of her journey. And she almost injured herself with them when she fell flat on the ground. The forest fairy intervened to interrupt her spell, ensuring that the girl wouldn't be harmed by the poisonous thorns. After crossing the river, she still needed a plan to climb the enormous tree and retrieve the silk bell. The forest fairy warned her about the dangerous poison in the thorns, explaining that it would take 3 hours for the poison to leave her body if she were pricked. Determined, she took off her red cape, knowing it would only hinder her while climbing. Rose was resolute in achieving her goal. She cautiously touched the sharp thorns on the tree trunk, acknowledging that she had no other choice. With great effort, Rose managed to climb a little on the tall tree trunk, hoping to reach the top. However, she was aware that the climb would be perilous. Several long and exhausting minutes passed as Rose continued her ascent. Finally, she completed the deadly climb up the tree. Rose felt a sense of happiness as she reached the top of the tree, knowing that she had overcome not only the thorns but also her fear. There was a boy sitting in front of her, leaning over the silk bell. Rose hadn't expected to see anyone else there and wondered if someone had beaten her to it. She couldn't believe her eyes. She had put in so much effort to get this far and obtain the silk bell, but someone else was already there. The boy, dressed like an aristocrat, seemed to come from a wealthy family. He asked who she was. Without hesitation, she attacked him in order to claim the silk bell for herself. She knew that returning to the mansion empty-handed was not an option. The boy tried to resist, but he couldn't match Rose's strength. He called out to her, but she swiftly knocked him to the ground, not allowing him to move. Luck was on her side during the fight. The boy turned to her again and asked how she had managed to attack him. Rose had no idea who this boy in aristocratic clothing was, but she suspected that he had the resources and opportunities to seek revenge on her for her audacity. In response, Rose apologized but made it clear that she couldn't give in to him. This was a matter of life or death for her, and only one of them would obtain the silk bell. With a burst of strength, he pushed the girl away, hoping that it would put an end to the pointless conflict. Rose, surprised by the boy's display of strength, calmed down slightly and looked at him. He didn't seem as intimidating as she initially thought. Without hesitation, Rose lunged towards the silk bell, attempting to snatch it away. The boy reacted quickly, but it was too late. The girl managed to rip the magic flower from its roots. Rose realized that she had achieved her objective. Now, her priority was to escape and make her way back to Kasha. The boy tried to stop her, but his efforts were in vain. Rose had already sprinted to the edge of the platform. However, luck was not on her side this time. She ran so fast that she became distracted and tripped over a branch, causing her shoe to slip off her foot. Well, perplexed by this, the boy soon realized the cause: scratches on the girl's hands and face. It became apparent that she had been climbing the tree without any protection and was now entangled in poisonous thorns. The girl's body was poisoned, putting her in grave danger. Fortunately, the boy possessed an antidote that could counteract the poison. He offered it to her in exchange for the silk bell, explaining the urgent need for her to take it or face death. However, the girl adamantly refused to part with the silk bell, believing she had enough strength to overcome the poison's effects and fearlessly facing death. Standing on the edge of the platform, the girl suddenly lost consciousness, causing Rose to fall towards the ground. Reacting swiftly, the boy reached out, desperately trying to catch the girl by her dress. Despite his final effort, he failed to grasp her in time. Rose plummeted from the cliff. Determined to survive, she mustered the remaining strength she had, attempting to cling onto the sharp thorns enveloping the tree. It was her last desperate attempt to stay alive. Miraculously, her fall came to a halt, as if she had managed to grab onto something. Perhaps there was still a chance for her to be saved if she made the right moves. Opening her eyes, the rush of adrenaline coursing through her veins allowed her to regain her senses momentarily. Rose noticed that her sleeve had become entangled in a large thorn, preventing her from falling any further. She felt a wave of relief wash over her, knowing that she would be saved. However, she also realized that her current position, clinging onto a torn sleeve stuck on a sharp thorn, was far from ideal. Suddenly, the fragile sleeve of her old dress gave way under the tension, causing her to start falling once again. This time, the consequences would be dire, as she had risked her life in her pursuit of the silk bell. As Rose plummeted from a great height, a boy sat on the edge of the platform, horror-stricken by the sight. Not only was the unfortunate girl falling into the abyss, but the silk bell was also lost. Fear filled Rose's eyes as she realized that her death was inevitable. Desperate to survive, she tried to grab onto more sharp thorns with her last ounce of strength, but her efforts were in vain. A tragic end seemed unavoidable. However, just as all hope seemed lost, a familiar female voice commanded that the test should come to an end. With a wave of her hand, a magical spell was cast by the mysterious sorceress. The spell slowed down Rose's fall, allowing Kasia to catch her and save her from certain death. Kasia carefully examined Rose and reassured her that she was now safe and no longer needed to fear. As Rose lay semi-conscious in Kasia's arms, she couldn't believe that she was still alive. Kasia gently laid her down on the soft grass, and Noah, confused and concerned, rushed over to them. Seeing Rose covered in blood, Noah questioned the sorceress, who explained that the girl had been injured by the poisonous thorns that surrounded the tree. It appeared that Rose had bravely climbed to the top without any protection.